Hansel and Gretel.
Once upon a time, deep in a verdant forest, there was a humble woodcutter. He lived deep in the forest with his wife. She was a kind and gentle woman. They had 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. The family did not have much money, but their home was always cozy and warm, and the children always had soup and bread to eat. They never went hungry. One year, there was a terribly cold winter, and Hansel and Gretel's mother became ill and died. In time, the woodcutter married another woman, yet, unlike his first wife, she was not kind and gentle. She was cruel and selfish. She wanted to be rich, and she wanted to eat fancy foods like roast beef, mashed potatoes, peas, corn, lemon cakes, and exotic fruits from sunny lands. She was angry that they could only afford soup and bread for every meal. Soup and bread, soup and bread, soup and bread, every day. Soup and bread. I am so tired of soup and bread, she complained. Due to the cold weather that year, domestic prices soared, leading to a situation where the woodcutter's family struggled from meal to meal, unable even to ensure their daily bread. One night, the woodcutter lay in bed, restless with worry, sighing and groaning over their plight. Finally, he said to his stepwife, "What are we to do? We don't have anything to eat ourselves. How can we continue to provide for our poor children?" "Listen to me," the stepwife said. "Tomorrow morning, we'll take the children deep into the forest. There, we'll make a fire for them and give each a small piece of bread. Then we'll pretend to go about our work and leave them alone. They won't know the way back, and we won't know the way back, and we won't have to care for them anymore." "But that's impossible," the woodcutter protested. "I can't do that. How could I bear to leave my children in the woods for the wild animals?" "Oh, you fool," the stepwife complained. "If we don't do this, all of us will starve." After much complaining, she finally persuaded the woodcutter to reluctantly agree. At that moment, the 2 children, unable to sleep from hunger, happened to overhear the entire conversation between their stepmother and father. Hearing the stepmother's suggestion, Gretel began to cry sorrowfully, saying to Hansel, "Now we are completely doomed. Don't talk, don't make sound, Gretel." Hansel comforted her. "Don't worry, I'll figure something out." After the 2 adults had fallen asleep, Hansel put on his coat, quietly opened the back door, and sneaked out to the backyard. The bright moonlight made the white pebbles on the ground glisten like silver coins. He crouched down and started picking up the white pebbles, filling the pockets of his coat. Then Hansel returned to the house and reassured Gretel. "Don't worry, little sister, go to sleep. We'll be all right." After that, he went back to sleep. As the first light of dawn appeared and before the sun had risen, the stepmother roused the 2 children. Get up, you lazy bones," she exclaimed. "We're going to the forest to chop wood." She handed each child a small piece of bread, adding, "This is all you get to eat today, so don't eat it too soon." Gretel hid her bread under her apron, as Hansel's pockets were already stuffed with white stones. Soon, the entire family began their journey towards the forest. Hansel frequently paused to look back at their home. Noticing this, his father asked, "Hansel, why do you keep turning back? Pay attention to your path." "Oh, Dad," Hansel answered, "I'm looking at my white cat sitting on the roof, waving goodbye to me." "That's not your cat, you silly boy," the stepmother interjected. "That's the neighbor's." However, Hansel wasn't really looking at a cat. He was secretly taking out the bright white stones from his pocket and dropping them along their walked path. Deep inside the forest, their father instructed them, "Kids, gather some firewood, and I will make a fire for you." Hansel and Gretel collected a large amount of dry branches, forming a pile as high as a small mountain. When the fire was lit and the flames blazed up, the stepmother said to them, "Sit here and stay. Your father and I will go further into the forest to chop wood. Once we finish our work, we will return to take you home." Hansel and Gretel sat beside the fire, waiting for their parents to finish their work and come back for them. By noon, they had eaten their small piece of bread. Since they continuously heard the sound of an axe chopping wood, they believed their father was nearby. However, the sound they heard was not really from an axe, but a dry branch tied to a small tree, hitting the trunk as it was blown by the wind. The siblings sat for a very long time, growing hungry and sleepy by the warm fire. Soon, they both fell asleep, and when they woke up, it was already a pitch black night. Gretel, terrified, started to cry, saying, "Now we won't be able to find our way back home. Don't worry." Hansel comforted her. "When the moon comes out, we will quickly find our way home." Before long, as the moon rose, Hansel took his sister's hand, and they followed the path indicated by the white stones that glittered like stars on the ground under the moonlight. They walked the entire night, and, as dawn was breaking, they arrived back at their home. Hansel knocked on the door, and it was their stepmother who opened it. Seeing Hansel and Gretel, she scolded loudly, "How could you sleep in the forest for so long? We thought you didn't want to come back home." Seeing his children, their father was overjoyed, as he had been deeply distressed about abandoning them. The family continued to live together under difficult circumstances. However, it wasn't long before they ran out of food again. One night, the children overheard their stepmother speaking to their father. "All the food in the house is gone, except for this half loaf of bread. What will we do in the future? We must get rid of the children, or else we will all starve. This time, we can take them deeper and further into the forest, so they can never find their way back. It's the only way to save ourselves." Hearing his wife's plan to abandon the children again, the woodcutter was deeply distressed. He thought to himself, wouldn't it be better for the family to share the last piece of bread, no matter how hard life was? But, like many men, he found it extremely difficult to say no to a woman, and the woodcutter was no exception. Having given in to his wife once, he inevitably succumbed a second time, silently agreeing to her proposal. The children heard the entire conversation. After their parents had fallen asleep, Hansel tried to get up and sneak out to collect pebbles like the last time. But this time, he found the door locked by his stepmother. However, he quickly came up with a new plan and reassured his little sister, "Don't cry, Gretel. Don't worry. Go back to sleep. We'll be all right." Early the next morning, the stepmother forcefully roused the children from their beds. She gave each of them a piece of bread, but these were much smaller than the ones they had received before. On their way to the forest, Hansel crumbled his bread in his pocket and periodically stopped to scatter the crumbs along the path. "Hansel, why do you keep lagging behind and looking back?" the woodcutter asked, noticing Hansel always trailing behind. "I'm looking at my little dove on the rooftop saying goodbye to me," Hansel replied. "You fool!" his stepmother shouted. "That's not your dove." Nevertheless, Hansel continued to fall behind, discreetly dropping his breadcrumb trail. The stepmother led them on a long walk, deep into a part of the forest they had never been to before, as he had done previously. The father built a large fire. The stepmother then instructed them, "Stay here. Children, if you're tired, you can sleep. We're going to chop wood a bit further away, and we'll come back to get you once we're done." By noon, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, as he had scattered his own along their path. Eventually, the two of them fell asleep again. They woke up in the middle of the night to find that no one had come to fetch them in the darkness. Hansel comforted his sister, saying, "Once the moon comes out, we'll be able to see the breadcrumbs I've dropped, and they will show us the way home." However, when the moon rose, they couldn't find a single breadcrumb. All the crumbs had been pecked away by the birds flying around in the forest. "I'm scared," wept Gretel, "and I'm cold and hungry, and I want to go home. Don't worry. Everything will be all right," Hansel said, trying to be brave, but he was scared too. Hansel and Gretel wandered the forest all night under the moonlight, but they couldn't find their way out. They were so hungry they felt dizzy. Having eaten only a few berries they found on the ground, exhausted to the point of being unable to walk any further, they eventually collapsed and fell asleep under a tree. By the morning of the third day, Hansel and Gretel were deeply lost in the woods. If they didn't get help soon, they were certain to perish. Just then, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird perched on a branch, singing melodiously. The siblings couldn't help but stop and listen to its enchanting song. After it finished singing, the bird spread its wings and flew before them, as if beckoning them to follow. They followed the bird, and there was a sweet, delicious smell in the air. "I am so hungry," said Gretel. "I think I smell cookies." "Look," said Hansel, pointing. A house. It was the strangest house they had ever seen. The walls looked like yellow lemon cookies. The windows looked like they were made of chocolate. The roof looked like it was made of green and red candies. Hansel was starving, so he ran to the house and broke off a piece of the wall. "This tastes like a lemon cookie," he said, surprised. Gretel grabbed a piece of a window and stuffed it in her mouth. "This is chocolate." The children could not stop eating. "We'll stay here forever," Hansel declared, munching on the apple pie porch. Then they heard a thin voice call out from inside, "Nibble, nibble, like a mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" The children answered, "Never mind, it is the wind." They went on eating, never disturbing themselves. Hansel, who found that the roof tasted very nice, took down a great piece of it, and Gretel pulled out a large round window pane and sat her down and began upon it. Suddenly, the door of the house opened, and an aged woman came out, leaning upon a crutch. Hansel and Gretel felt very frightened and let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Ah, my dear children, how come you here? Do you children like sweets? I have more inside the house. Come in, come in. Don't be afraid." The old woman looked kind and friendly. She took them each by the hand and led them into her little house, and there they found a good meal laid out of milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. After that, she showed them 2 little white beds, and Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down on them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman, although her behavior was so kind, was a wicked witch who lay in wait for children and had built the little house on purpose to entice them. When they were once inside, she used to kill them, cook them, and eat them. Early in the morning, before the children were awake, the old witch got up to look at them, and as they lay sleeping so peacefully with round rosy cheeks, she felt hungry. The witch grabbed Hansel, locked him in a dark storage room, and secured him behind a barred gate. Hansel screamed and shouted from inside, but it was all in vain. Then the old witch went to wake up Gretel, barking at her, "Get up, lazy bones. Fetch water and cook something nice for your brother. He is locked in the storage room, and I'm going to fatten him up before I eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. And so the best kind of victuals was cooked for poor Hansel, while Gretel got nothing but 1 slice of bread. The next morning, the old witch visited the storage room and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may tell if you will soon be fat enough." Hansel, however, used to hold out a little bone, and the old witch, who had weak eyes, could not see what it was, and supposing it to be Hansel's finger, wondered very much that it was not getting fatter. "You're still too thin," she complained. "Come here, foolish, and give your brother more sweets to eat." This continued for an entire week. Every day, the witch checked to see if Hansel was fat enough. Every day, Hansel held out the little bone. Finally, the witch got tired of waiting. On the 8th day, she called to Gretel, "Come here, foolish girl. Light the oven. Today, I am going to eat roasted boy with carrots and gravy. Check if the oven is hot enough to roast your brother." But clever little Gretel had a plan. She started to cry. "But I am too stupid. How do I know if the oven is hot enough? Can you show me?" she asked. The witch muttered and grumbled, "Celeste, child, I'll check the oven myself." The witch bent down to look at the bright orange flames, and quickly Gretel pushed her into the oven and slammed the door shut. That was the end of the witch. Gretel opened the storage room and released Hansel. The children found a basket filled with cakes, biscuits, pies, and candies. They also discovered jewels and gold in the witch's chest. Hansel and Gretel left the witch's house, running through the forest all night, then crossed a bridge. They crawled through a hole in the fence, turned left, then right, left again, and right. Finally, they heard the sound of wood chopping in the distance. It was their father, the woodcutter. Hearing noises nearby, he saw his children and rushed to embrace and kiss them. The woodcutter wept tears of joy, overjoyed to see them. "I'm sorry, children. I should not have abandoned you," the woodcutter cried sorrowfully. "Your stepmother has left this home for good. I deeply regret abandoning you, and I hope you can forgive me. Can we start our lives over again?" Hansel and Gretel forgave their father and shared with him their experiences. That night, Hansel, Gretel, and their father held a celebration. They ate all the sweets from the basket: cherry pie, chocolate cake, green and red candies, blue lollipops, and gingerbread. Later that year, Hansel and Gretel were going to the bakery in town when they saw an old woman begging for coins. It was their stepmother. "Children, please help me. I am starving," she begged. Gretel thought for a moment. She went inside the bakery and bought a small loaf of bread and a small bowl of soup. "Here," Gretel said, "soup and bread, your favorite." Hansel and Gretel never saw their stepmother ever again.